The galaxy had long written off Earth as insignificant. Nestled on the fringe of the Milky Way, a planet in the backwaters of the universe, Earth was nothing more than a curiosity. A place where primitive humans scraped together a living, slowly emerging from their caveman ancestors. Even the most powerful species in the galaxy, from the telepathic Actari to the war-driven Varnashians, barely paid the planet any mind. To them, Earth was just another rocky world full of barely evolved creatures who stumbled upon space travel by accident, and perhaps that was true for a time. But the myth of the deadly Mittens had lingered, passed on in hushed tones, by those few who had crossed paths with humanity and lived to tell the tale. The myth wasn't just a story, it was a warning. It began with the Olsiki, an ancient and enigmatic race who vanished eons ago, leaving behind relics and mysteries scattered across the stars. The Mittens, seemingly a harmless artifact, were rumoured to be one of their creations, a gift, perhaps, for a species they believed could someday become more than it seemed. Earth had its legends of warriors in ancient history, but these Mittens were different. The stories told of Earth's most dangerous fighters, not just soldiers, but ordinary people who, when they donned the Mittens, would become unstoppable. Whether it was their speed, strength, or an unnatural calm in battle, those who wore the Mittens were said to possess a power that bent reality itself. The X-Cra had been the first to learn the truth of that myth, after their attempt to invade Earth ended in disaster. Their fleets, advanced beyond measure, were torn apart by what they would later call the Great Reckoning, a force they could not understand. Those who survived the first encounter would go on to spread word of the deadly Mittens, but few believed them. To the rest of the galaxy, it was just a story, until one day it wasn't. The X-Cra, notorious for their relentless conquests, had never met a species they couldn't dominate. Their insectoid biology, paired with their overwhelming technological superiority, made them a terrifying force. They could tear through a planet's defenses in a matter of days, wiping out entire populations with brutal efficiency. When their scouts discovered Earth, they saw an easy target. Primitive, isolated, and unprepared, they would crush humanity and take the planet's resources without breaking a sweat. Their invasion was swift. A fleet of X-Cra warships descended on Earth's orbit, their massive crescent-shaped ships blotting out the sky. The humans, unprepared, scrambled to defend their cities. But their weapons were no match for the alien armada, and their military struggled to mount any kind of effective resistance. Yet, as the X-Cra forces began to deploy on the ground, something unexpected happened. Sergeant Rick Tanner, a member of a small elite unit stationed in the Midwest, was among the first to meet the invaders face to face. Armed with only basic gear, Tanner and his squad were caught in an ambush as the X-Cra surged into their sector. But as the battle raged on, something strange occurred. Tanner, a 32-year-old infantryman with little distinction among his peers, reached into his pack and pulled out a pair of thick, knitted mittens. They were nothing special, just a pair of woolen gloves his grandmother had made for him before she passed. But when Tanner slipped them on, everything changed. His senses sharpened. His body surged with energy. He moved faster than he ever thought possible, dodging laser fire and smashing through enemy lines with brutal efficiency. His squad watched in stunned disbelief as Tanner, seemingly invincible, tore through the X-Cra with ease. One by one, the alien soldiers felt of his unstoppable force. The tide turned quickly. Within hours, the X-Cra found themselves retreating. Their once invincible army was broken. Tanner, his mittens still on, stood in the wreckage of what had been an overwhelming invasion force. Earth had won, and for the first time, the galaxy had to reckon with the legend of the deadly Mittens. The story spread fast, but not all of the galaxy believed it. Not yet. The reports from Earth hit the Galactic Council like a shockwave. For weeks, they had watched the Execra's invasion unfold, certain that it would be just another easy victory, a planet's last gasp before it was swallowed by the galaxy's vast, uncaring expanse. But when the Execra fleet was routed, the Council's once unshakable confidence began to crack. The story was bizarre, impossible even. A handful of humans, wearing woolen mittens, had driven the mighty Execra to retreat, and yet there was no denying the evidence. The Actari, telepathic and always calculating, were the first to voice concern. Their leaders convened with cold, precise logic. "If this is true," High Counselor Sarkesh murmured, "then we may have underestimated humanity." But how? How could they possess such power? The Execra had been humiliated, and their leaders, once proud and terrifying, were now scrambling to explain the unexplainable. They had faced humans with primitive technology, expecting an easy conquest, and yet they were the ones who had been forced to flee. The Actari's delicate minds could barely fathom the situation. The only thing that made sense was that the Mittens were more than just simple artifacts. But what were they? And why had no one in the galaxy ever heard of such power before? The Varnashans, never ones to hesitate, made their stance clear. "We cannot ignore this. We need to know more," said Commander Volch, his voice cold with ambition. "If humanity has discovered a power we don't understand, we must control it, or they will grow beyond us." A meeting of the Galactic Council was called, a gathering of the most powerful and feared species in the universe, all united by a single goal: Earth's strange and sudden rise. Each race had their own motivations. The Actari feared the disruption of the cosmic balance. The Varnashans feared the loss of their dominance. The Melsu, shapeshifters who had quietly watched Earth for centuries, were now questioning their centuries-old strategies. There was no consensus, only growing fear. The story of Earth and the deadly Mittens could no longer be dismissed as a myth. The galaxy had just learned that the most dangerous species in the universe might not be the Execra or the Varnashans, but a small, unassuming planet on the edge of known space. And if the Mittens were real, the humans who wore them were something far more dangerous than anyone had expected. On Earth, the victory over the Execra began to be hailed as a symbol of human resilience, but it also raised more questions than answers. Who could have imagined that something as simple as a pair of woolen mittens could hold such power? As the myth of the deadly Mittens began to spread across the galaxy, humanity's governments scrambled to understand just what they had stumbled upon. Dr. Kate Marshall, a brilliant archaeologist and historian, was one of the few who suspected that the Mittens might be more than just an earthling oddity. For weeks, she pored over ancient texts, looking for anything that might explain the sudden surge in human capability. Her curiosity grew when she found a mention of a lost civilization, the Osiki, in a forgotten manuscript of early interstellar explorers. There was a brief, cryptic passage referring to gifts left for a species with untapped potential. The Osiki had vanished from the galaxy millennia ago, leaving behind few traces of their existence. But what they left was profound. Hidden in the legends was a suggestion that the Osiki had once visited Earth, seeing something in humanity that no other species had. A primal, latent power, something that could either shape the future of the galaxy or destroy it. Kate's research led her to an ancient site in the heart of Africa, where she uncovered an artifact that had eluded discovery for centuries. It was a piece of crystalline material, almost alive, humming with energy. The Osiki, it turned out, had crafted more than just the Mittens. They had woven into them a complex energy field that resonated with the unique biology of Earth's inhabitants. This field, Kate realized, could amplify the human body's natural abilities, unlocking latent genetic potential that no alien race could ever replicate. Her breakthrough sent shockwaves through Earth's scientific community, but Kate knew it was only the beginning. The Mittens weren't just a physical tool. They were a key. They connected humans to something greater than themselves, a force that was alien to the rest of the galaxy. And if humanity could harness it, the consequences for the galaxy would be profound. But for now, there was a bigger question. How long would it be before the rest of the universe realized that Earth had become more than just a threat? It had become a force. The panic that had swept through the Galactic Council was beginning to manifest in action. Fearing the rising power of Earth, a coalition of the galaxy's most dominant species, the Excra, Varnashans, Aktari, and Melsu, began to mobilize in secret. They had lost face in the wake of Earth's unexpected resistance, but now they were determined to correct the mistake. A new plan was set in motion. Earth must be neutralized before humanity could become a true galactic power. The first wave of the Alliance's retaliation came in the form of targeted, covert strikes. Small, elite units of the Excra and Melsu were dispatched to Earth's most strategic locations, hoping to capture or destroy the deadly Mittens. The Alliance believed that if they could seize the Mittens, they could either neutralize humanity's newfound advantage or reverse engineer their power for their own use. However, they had underestimated the tenacity of Earth's defenders. The humans, now more organized and vigilant than ever, fought back with surprising precision. Led by Sergeant Rick Tanner, the same soldier could have first turned the tide of the Excra invasion. Earth's forces held the line. Tanner, now promoted and hailed as a hero, was part of a special ops unit tasked with protecting key artifacts, including the Mittens. The Mittens had been stored in several highly secure locations around the world, and their significance was now clear to all. They were the key to humanity's survival, and possibly to its ascendancy. When the first wave of alien operatives arrived, they were met with an unexpected resistance. As one of the Melsu agents attempted to infiltrate a military base in the American Midwest, he was taken down by a single soldier, a young woman named Ellie Carter, who had never seen combat before that day. But as soon as she put on the Mittens, she was transformed. Her mind sharpened, her reflexes became lightning fast, and she incapacitated the alien agent in moments. The other operatives were similarly dispatched by humans who had suddenly become warriors in a way no one could have predicted. The Galactic Alliance, shaken by these failures, called for a new approach. They knew they couldn't take Earth head-on. The Mittens were too powerful, too unpredictable. Instead, they would need to find another way, one more subtle, more insidious. The hunt for Earth's greatest secret was only just beginning. But the more they pushed, the more they realized humanity wasn't just defending itself. It was evolving, and the rest of the galaxy was beginning to take notice. The growing power of Earth was now undeniable. Even as the Galactic Alliance's covert operations failed, one thing was clear. Humanity was no longer the weak, isolated species it had once been. Earth's military had become a force to be reckoned with, and the deadly Mittens, it seemed, were not only amplifying human strength, but unlocking a potential that was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Council, still reeling from their initial failures, realized they needed to act swiftly, but they also knew they could not do so through brute force alone. In the shadows of the Galactic Council, a faction of high-ranking officials began to entertain darker, more treacherous options. The Excra, still humiliated by their failure, pushed for direct military action, but the Aktari, ever the schemers, saw a different path. They were patient and calculating. They had always believed in manipulating events from behind the scenes. They proposed a dangerous gamble. If the Alliance couldn't conquer Earth, they could at least control it. They would attempt to steal the secret of the Mittens, not through warfare, but through deceit. A covert faction of the Galactic Council, led by High Minister Rel Vash of the Aktari, began negotiating in secret with Earth's highest-ranking traitors. These were high-ranking politicians and military leaders who were desperate to protect their own interests as Earth's strength grew. Promises of power, riches, and safe positions within a new galactic order were enough to convince them. The traitors agreed to secretly share humanity's most guarded secrets with the Alliance, including the location of the Mittens. As the betrayal took shape, the Council made their move, and a clandestine strike force was dispatched to Earth, aiming to infiltrate the planet and steal the Mittens. The operation, codenamed Eclipse, began under the cover of darkness. But when the Aktari agents arrived at Earth's most secure sites, they found the Mittens waiting for them. In a cruel twist, they were not met by Earth's soldiers, but by the Mittens themselves. The moment the Aktari tried to claim the Mittens, they were struck by an unforeseen force. The Gloves, which had always chosen their human bearers, rejected the aliens with violent consequences. The traitors, attempting to wield the Mittens, were instantly overwhelmed, their bodies convulsing as the Mittens surged with raw, destructive energy. In an instant, they were consumed by the very power they sought to exploit. The betrayal was exposed in a matter of hours. The traitors were eliminated, and the rest of the Galactic Council could only watch in horror. The myth of the Mittens was no longer a story. It was a deadly reality, and no one, not even the most powerful forces in the galaxy, could control it. The galaxy was beginning to understand something more terrifying than the Mittens themselves. Earth had become an unpredictable force, and its true power was yet to be unleashed. The betrayal had shattered the fragile alliances within the Galactic Council, and now Earth's forces were more resolute than ever. The attempted theft of the Mittens, the brutal rejection of the Aktari, and the rising tide of human resistance had lit a fire under the rest of humanity. No longer just a planet scrambling for survival, Earth was beginning to transform into something greater, a rallying point for those oppressed by the galactic powers who had once dominated them. Sergeant Rick Tanner, now a celebrated leader, stood at the front of a growing army of human soldiers, scientists, and strategists who were not just defending their world anymore. They were preparing to liberate the galaxy. The Mittens had proven that humans could rise to meet any challenge, and they had proven that their power was not just in their technology, but in their will and their unity. Earth was ready to show the galaxy that it had underestimated them for far too long. The first strike came swiftly. A coalition of former enemies, planets that had been under the thumb of the Varmashians, the Excra, and the Aktari, sent envoys to Earth, seeking an alliance. Earth welcomed them, forming a powerful new coalition that consisted of liberated worlds and rebellious factions who had long lived in the shadow of the Galactic Council. The humans were no longer the underdogs. They were leaders, guiding the oppressed in their fight for freedom. But even with the might of the Mittens on their side, Earth's forces knew they couldn't win by sheer strength alone. They had learned much from their enemies. Tactical strikes, cyber warfare, and guerrilla tactics became their specialty. As Earth's military forces began to sweep through previously occupied systems, the once feared alien invaders were forced to retreat. Every time a new world fell to Earth's forces, humanity's reputation grew. The Mittens, now seen as both a symbol of strength and a warning to the galaxy, had become the key to Earth's rapid rise. And with every victory, the galaxy was forced to take notice. They could no longer ignore humanity. What had once been a myth, the deadly Mittens, was now a tangible force, and humanity had only just begun to wield it. The next step was inevitable. Earth would not simply defend itself. It would change the galaxy, one world at a time, and there was no turning back. The war was over, or at least it was for the moment. The galaxy, once dominated by the Galactic Council and its iron-fisted control, was now in disarray. Planets that had long suffered under the boot of alien overlords were free, and Earth, once a quiet, insignificant planet on the fringes of the Milky Way, had emerged as the most powerful force in the galaxy. The deadly Mittens were no longer a myth or a legend. They were a symbol of human might and a constant reminder of the untapped potential that lay within every human. Sergeant Rick Tanner, now a general, stood at the head of the new United Earth Federation, addressing a gathering of leaders from across the liberated worlds. The once disjointed factions of humanity had united under a single banner, and now they stood as the most influential power in the galaxy. The Mittens, which had played such a critical role in Earth's rise, were guarded more fiercely than any other artifact in human history, their secrets kept under the strictest of security. Only a handful of humans now wore them, those who had earned the right, who had proved themselves worthy. But the rest of the galaxy would never truly understand their power. Despite the victory, Earth's leaders understood that their new position came with responsibility. They had proven they could fight, but now they would need to govern, to lead a galaxy that was both afraid of their strength and hopeful for their future. General Tanner stood at the forefront of those efforts, forging new alliances with the formerly oppressed worlds. He worked tirelessly to ensure that humanity's newfound power would be used for peace, not conquest. However, there were whispers. Dissenters, from both within and outside Earth's borders, wondered what the future would hold. Could humanity remain peaceful, or would they become the very thing they had once fought against? The Mittens, after all, had unlocked something primal and uncontrollable in humanity. And while they may have saved Earth from destruction, there was no guarantee that they wouldn't one day turn against the galaxy itself. The rest of the galaxy, still reeling from humanity's rapid ascension, would watch with bated breath. Earth had changed the balance of power forever, but as the humans looked to the stars, they knew that the real challenge was just beginning, not just to hold on to their power, but to prove that they could be a force for something greater than just survival. The deadly Mittens had given them strength. Now, it was up to them to prove they had the wisdom to wield it.